A land so wide and open, with water and forests and hidden places. It's the area surrounding the German capital, in the northeast, close to Poland. And within this landscape, right in the middle of it, lies another world. A city, so dense and yet so free. From above you can see the beauty of this region. From above you can see the possibilities, not the borders. 6 million people live and work here. A center of science and a metropolis of culture. East and West having grown together following years of separation. The city has strengths and potential for both the young and the old. It is uniquely attractive amongst the 11 European metropolitan regions. People migration has been documented here since the 5th century. Just like the golden eagle, he has returned here after several years. For a long time he lived between the Elbe and the Oder until he was hunted. 2 world wars, a separation and a reunification. Later the King of the Skies was seen again. But will he stay? The prowl through his old hunting ground begins to the north of Berlin, in the Schorfheide region. His wings can stretch out over 2 meters wide. His sphere of activity extends up to 50 square kilometers. Berlin is surrounded by water, alternating between rivers and lakes. It's the most water-rich area in Germany. An old water tower on the border of Berlin in Joachimsthal. Half a home, half a viewing tower, with a view that looks far out into the distance, onto a landscape formed by the Ice Age. The Havel, here still small and playful, flows through half of the land. It no longer marks any border lines. It separates people now just as little as the Spree or the Landwehr Canal, functioning rather as a lifeline connecting the regions, towns and federal state. With 3.5 million residents, Berlin is the largest and most populous municipality in Germany. The days of the GDR are now long gone. It is still visible how the state envisioned the modern city to be, cast in concrete slabs, just like here in Neuruppin, a small town northwest of Berlin. Barracks once shaped this cityscape. Once the soldiers of Frederick the Great marched here. Neuruppin is occasionally regarded as the most Prussian of all Prussian towns. The socialist planners couldn't do much with the old town. It had deteriorated perceptibly. Very close to the monastery church, there lies a small chapel, the former hospital and the oldest timber frame house in the town, the Ubhus. A civil engineer from Neuruppin hesitated after the fall of the wall, whether to buy a new car or save the old ensemble. Gabriele Leto opted for the latter and renovated the buildings, opening a hotel and filling the chapel with life. The courageous Neuruppiner put a lot of love and work into the estate. The community is thankful to her. The former church became a private building and can now be used for different purposes. Gabriele Leto brought music and concerts into the old walls. Even in her youth, she often walked by here, looking over the fence and thinking, "Oh God, that really is beautiful." Then came the fall of the wall and everything stood derelict for over 10 years. The house and the church were in the most terrible condition, she explains today. The renovation was expensive. Now the small hotel is running lucratively. Nowadays, when she thinks back to the time of the renovation, she starts to feel queasy. The roofs were leaking, it rained right inside. There was dry rot inside the buildings, and the beams were rotten. The full extent of it only became clear once the work had started. Many people in Neuruppin said, "Phew, what has she taken on?" But just as everything was complete, it turned into, well, Mrs. Leto really has grabbed something good for herself here. But she takes that with a pinch of salt. Despite all the work and anguish, she never stopped going to the choir. Those 2 hours every day were like a little holiday. The journey continues, Berlin bound. The wide area surrounding the city is thinly populated. The GDR opted for large-scale agriculture over industrial centers. Only now are the city dwellers starting to rediscover the surrounding landscape. The old architects found their raw materials for their dreams in the Oberhavel area, in the clay pits at Zedernick. Bricks were fired here for over 100 years. When reunification came, the last brickyard had to close. But the stones that Berlin was built from came from here and were shipped across the Havel. Berlin, this eternally unfinished city, which is always becoming and never is. Which continually reinvents itself, and yet manages to stay true to itself. The capital city on the Spree, city of change, between old and new, between random and enchanting. City of separation, city of reunification. City of dreams, city of abyss. Right in the historical center, between the Lustgarten and the Spree, lies Berlin Cathedral, the largest church in the city. Below, in the burial vault, lie rows of the Hohenzollern family. And up on the roof, lives are buzzing, approximately 40,000 of them. Uwe Maudt is a teacher, but twice a week this hobby beekeeper climbs the steps of the cathedral to check that everything is all right with his 2 colonies of bees. The bees already look wonderfully mature, he says. All of that is honey. Lovely honey, and already ready. Heavenly. There were only very few places in Berlin where he couldn't put any bees for a lack of nourishment. Here in the center of Berlin on the Spree are many green spaces and maples, in front of the Alexanderplatz, in front of the Fountain of Neptune. The smoke from his pipe calms the excitable bees, so they leave him alone. The yield of honey is magnificent. All around the cathedral, chestnut and lime trees are in full bloom, so the bees always find food until the middle of July. The honey is harvested throughout the whole year. His bees never have a dry spell, In the open countryside, on the other hand, rapeseed blooms plentifully. But when it has gone, the bees run out of nourishment. And here, right at the cathedral, in the early summer, the oleander bushes are out. That lends the honey a very special flavor. So delicious, what a joy! The buzzing of bees above the roofs of the city. Maybe it is the small things that make real world history. The history of a cathedral on the Spree Island goes back to the 15th century. The cathedral was badly damaged in the Second World War. Reconstruction of the facade only began in 1975. Today, the cathedral stands once again at the center of Berlin. In the nearby Montbijou Park, people enjoy the warm midday sun. The Havel flows out into the country again. It is noticeable in the air how much the region is shaped by water. Brandenburg on the Havel. Cathedral Island, the cradle of the March of Brandenburg, built on the ruins of the Brandenburg Hill. Lüchen, surrounded by lakes. The town of Craftsmanship. And right in the north, Prenzlau, with its imposing Church of Mary. Its high church towers distract us from any sense of atheism. With the beauty of the landscape, you never know that fewer and fewer people see their future here. Brandenburg, the federal state around Berlin, becomes less and less populated towards its outer edges. The state is shrinking. In the capital of the federal state of Brandenburg, not 10 kilometers outside Berlin, things look different. Potsdam is booming. The town has spruced itself up. Away from the inner city is the Olympic Center, on the site of a former airship base, right where the Count Zeppelins once circulated. Top athletes have trained here since GDR times, right up until today. Triathlete Laura Lindemann is a particularly hopeful young talent. She trains in Potsdam in the Havel, the river that connects Potsdam with Berlin. I train in the mornings, she says, and go to school afterwards. Then I go to train again, and after that I really only eat and sleep again. And again, to train, school, train, eat, sleep. Sometimes she stops to rethink her everyday life, like not hanging around the swimming pool until 8 p.m. again. In her athletic boarding school, there are students who have stopped training and don't do sport anymore. They have time in the afternoons. Laura Lindemann, on the other hand, spends 90% of her life engaged in sport. The success provides more impetus for motivation and a hunger for even more success. The Olympics, that is her biggest goal. If she were to stop now, it's not that all of her work up to now would have been in vain, but that she wouldn't be able to reach her goal. Laura originally comes from Berlin-Spandau. For her, it was a big step to go to Potsdam. Potsdam was smaller but more familiar. Today she's running across the legendary Glienicke Bridge into Berlin. During Cold War times, international spies were exchanged on this bridge. Only the history books talk about that anymore. Nowadays, celebrities live in grand villas at the juncture between Potsdam and Berlin. The value placed on quality leisure time there is high. One can reach the centre of Berlin quickly by car. That makes the location even more exclusive and attractive. The Wannsee and its legendary outdoor swimming, the bathing paradise of the Berliners. Nearby, a small ferry connects the mainland with Peacock Island, the refuge of Prussian kings, and today a public park with a museum. Of course, Berlin would not be Berlin if every place weren't steeped in history. Here in the southwest were the main American headquarters. Thousands of soldiers were once stationed in the western part of the city. A candy bomber, the museum on Kleeallee, alongside the former soldiers' cinema behind the houses of the former occupying forces. And in the Grunewald forest, the madness of German history piled up there. At the place where the Nazis had started to build a defense faculty, Teufelsberg was formed from the rubble of the bombed city. And up here, in the early 50s, the Americans and the British built a listening station in the Cold War. One of the people who listened in to the Eastern Bloc from up here is Christopher McLaren from Washington, D.C. Today he works in the ruins of his old workplace as a tourist guide. Welcome to Teufelsberg. McLaren greets his small group on this particular day. Right now you're actually in my office, he says. This is where his desk was. The ceiling was lower back then, because the cable ducts were built above the offices. There must have been hundreds of kilometers of cable, McLaren estimates. Now all of that is gone, and it looks kind of pathetic compared to how it was. None of the US Americans came into these rooms back then. It was all a top-secret, restricted zone. The listening station at Teufelsberg was a kind of premonition. McLaren explains that they always joked about hearing the Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev brushing his teeth in Moscow. One floor higher, the next chapter of the history of this place comes to life. The spying mound as a backdrop for creative types. Two fashion students from Russia, of all places, Lena Chabrova and Kristina Huber, are having photos taken here for their latest collections. In the end, they really are all here. The clothes are inspired by costumes designed by the Russian avant-gardist Malevich for an opera over 100 years ago. The young designers purposely chose Teufelsberg as the location for the photo shoot. Berlin has always been a desirable place, a destination for millions of visitors and a new home for people from all over the world. The Berlin Victory Column, commonly known as the Golden Else. So much diversity, which must be most visible on Pentecost Sunday, when thousands of dancers and musicians weave through the streets. Next stop, the Carnival of the Cultures. It looks like it's just a lot of recreational fun. In reality, it's a time in which the world is as it could be, a good place for reflection. When, if not now, can we create a symbol for the good in life, for people from all cultures to come together? Where, if not here in Berlin, where creativity emerges out of opposites? Images like this shape the idea that the world has of Berlin. But of course, they don't show the whole truth. Berlin is also the grey remains of a time when people dreamed of a city fit for motorcars. The snake of public housing over the Autobahn in Wilmersdorf, civil planning utopia or a total nightmare. Even today, opinions remain divided about this monument of the 70s. Gropiusstadt, an answer to the housing crisis in West Berlin. But lively city life looks different to this. A housing estate with 18,500 apartments. A social hotbed and low-cost living space. And in the eastern sector, a similar image. Workers' lockers in Marzahn and Hellersdorf. But what's between the countless high-rises? A surprise. The Gardens of the World, Carnival of the Cultures in green. An unexpected space in the Trabant city. Anyone coming into the city from the east via Frankfurter Allee will notice a giant eye-catching mural. "500 square meters of bright colors on pale concrete." Just opposite, the former headquarters of the secret police of the GDR, the Ministry for State Security. In the heart of Lichtenberg, here a young man has launched an incredible career. Christian Aver, who started out as a graffiti artist, is today an internationally renowned artist. His studio is still in the middle of his old neighborhood. Here, Christian Aver has found the place for his creativity and artwork. He was born here in the east of Berlin in Lichtenberg, characterized by countless new housing estates. "I just learned," he says, "that everyone who comes into contact with art, culture, and creativity opens up their mind." It all began in the early 90s, pretty much opposite the Stasi. Right-wing groups like the NPD tried to spread here. He was concerned. "Man, we have to do something. We have to fight back. It can't be like this anymore." And so he painted on the Frankfurter Allee. For him, color is simply the energy of life. When you look at the images, at some point you start to see things, to make associations. I invite people to observe, to paint the images that are in their own heads, he says. So you see an image that at first glance is blue with a bright focal point. Blue as the color of freedom, of dreaming, of longing. He wants to present the creativity of the city, to show these lifelines, to create symbols for a new Berlin, and as such, to make a statement for freedom where previously there was none. The wild years after the fall of the wall are over. Nowadays, someone looking for adventure might arrive at the former Hotel Stadt Berlin, next to the Alex, the television tower. An event organizer from Munich is selling a jump into the deep. Each kick costs €80. Bungee jumping in the middle of the city, a modern extreme sport. The free fall is slowed down by a rubber cord along the ground attached to the body of the person jumping and the takeoff platform. Berlin. These are its contrasts. Event culture alongside Holocaust memorials. Dream and trauma. Democracy and dictatorship. The madness. Every stone here breathes with an ambivalence towards the past. In other places, grass gradually grows over history. All of the tanks and tracked vehicles have disappeared here. Sheep are now bleating on the derelict Russian military land. And sometimes wolves howl too. Unique natural landscapes have emerged since the occupiers withdrew almost overnight. For the Red Army, it was just a stone's throw to Berlin. The military training ground at Wittstock, better known as Bombodrom, a gigantic heath landscape in the Ostprignitz region. After the Soviets, the German army wanted to erect a firing range here, but the local people protested against it. Ammunition cases, grenades, military scrap spread across an area as wide as a quarter of Berlin. Nowadays the ground is still contaminated, but the pathways have been cleared. The first coach drivers offer rides. For example, Jürgen Strache, a professional horse keeper born and bred in this region. Today, he teaches people to drive horse-drawn carriages. I have the most beautiful workplace, he thinks, that you could ever imagine. Here in the heathland, you can't hear any other sounds. There's no motorway. There aren't even any dogs barking from the neighborhood. Simply silence and space. The residents demonstrated for years against the firing range here. In the small village of Zermützel, Jürgen Strache built a horse yard, together with his two sons and his wife, Natascha Geiersberg. His wife is from the West and found it delicate work to settle in here. Nowadays, there is hardly any difference, she says. Their son likes to help with the work, but he doesn't see his future in the country with the horses, even as beautiful as it is right now. The German army's decision not to use this as a training area was a stroke of luck for both of them. When the news became known, people threw their arms around each other, who, under other circumstances, would very likely not have done. For the people in the region, it was a wonderful feeling to have achieved so much together. Both of them have fulfilled one of their major dreams in life. He always wanted to do something with horses, and so did she. And then they met. So they never want to leave here anymore. The area is far too beautiful for that. In the sky above the March of Brandenburg, Right in the northeast of the state, in Uckermark, there are two things that many city folk don't know about. For one, the staggeringly beautiful Odertal. For another, the oil refinery in Schwedt. Almost all of the petrol for Berlin, all of the diesel, the domestic fuel oil and kerosene are produced here. Without Schwedt, nothing in Berlin would function. The energy of the city. On some days, everything vibrates. Cars, trains, people. It simmers and bubbles out onto the streets, in squares, and in the parks. For example, here, where the wall once stood, patrols of border soldiers walked, and the eastern sector of the city was separated from the western sector with the order to open fire. The areas of Prenzlauer Berg and Wedding were separated back then. Nowadays, the Mauerpark is a party mile. Just a few meters further, the fun comes to a halt. The same border strip at Bernauer Straße. Memorial. The final resting place of a huge wound that will never completely heal. The wall stood for almost 30 years, from August the 13th, 1962, up to November the 9th, 1989. The German division came to an end without a single shot being fired. Two unlikely friends. One of them is Dr. Renate Verwig-Schneider, a pediatrician. After a failed attempt at escaping shortly after the wall was built, she spent years in Stasi prisons. The other, Dilara Dodogali, born the year after reunification. As a child, she was a patient of Dr. Verwig-Schneider, and they became friends. The wall for Dilara used to be just a story from a time gone by. The old route of the wall is shown here symbolically with poles. It has never been anything other than normal for Dilara to see people able to move from the east to the west with just a little jump. Before November the 9th, 1989, people had to pay with their lives to do that. For Renate Verwig-Schneider, the yearning for freedom was so strong that she even considered the cost of her own life to make the escape. Right there where the White House is today, she and her friends had built a tunnel under the wall. The tunnel was reported, and everyone involved went to prison. Deserting the Republic was an offense. The young Dilara has a lot of respect for the victims. The old lady is a role model for her with such willpower. Berlin is home for Dilara. She comes from a Turkish family herself. The doctor, Renate Verwig-Schneider, no longer hates the people who put her in prison. But she is still angry. She's furious. If she were to receive an apology, it might be different. But that has never arrived. Sometimes you can feel dizzy with so much symbolism. The Spree, formerly a border river. The Molecule Man, at the juncture between Friedrichshain, Kreuzberg and Treptow, a memorial for unity. The journey continues across the Köpenick area of Berlin and out towards the edge of the city. Further to the south, in Lausitz, the idyll becomes tarnished. The Spree River, iron polluted, a result of the brown coal pits. A whole region neglected and scarred. The mining does give many people work, but the price that nature has to pay is immeasurable. The brown coal in Lausitz was formed around 15 to 20 million years ago. The GDR mined the black gold practically without any consideration for the environment. 10,000 people worked here. Today, the number of jobs is estimated to be 8,200, with 25,000 suppliers. The brown coal is mostly mined with the help of brown coal excavators and conveyor bridges. Villages that once stood here had to disappear. A landscape has been left behind where hardly anything grows anymore. Not far away in the Elbe-Elster area, the mine is already history. The enormous F-60 overburden conveyor bridge, the horizontal Eiffel Tower of Lausitz, a memorial to industry, a day trip destination and adventure playground for climbers. A landscape running out of time. At some point, it will disappear. Renaturation is the magic word. Around Senftenberg, the mine craters have already been flooded, leaving bizarre formations. A little piece of the Amazon at the gateway to Berlin. Europe's largest artificial water landscape is due to open here soon. Back towards Berlin, past Belitz, the sandy soil of the March of Brandenburg, the ideal nourishing ground for its famous asparagus. Agriculture. A complicated history. Small family-run businesses are rare. The price of land is rising. In the past, agricultural cooperatives cultivated the land. Nowadays, agricultural companies are spreading. But exceptions do exist. For example, in Brugg, on the edge of Flaming. Farmer Bernd Schulz runs his pig farm here. Everything is organic and, most importantly, open air in an unusually spacious area. Only 33 breeding sows, a laughably small number compared to industrial animal farming. The concept is successful. Farmer Schultz, who ran a large fattening system in GDR times, is able to live quite well from the skillful direct sale of his free-range pigs. He simply wanted to do it differently. No mass production, no caging of animals, organic and able to run around freely. At his farm, the pigs can forage around in the earth. Move quickly, move slowly. The pork is top quality. Customers from Berlin return time and again. His example is encouraging others to follow suit. The offspring are sold to young farmers who want to work just like he does. You just have to be able to catch them. Well, that's just how it is. If you give your pigs more freedom, you have more work to do. The giant forest areas are striking. Almost 40% of Brandenburg is covered with trees, above all with local pines. Monocultures, a result of fast reforestation. The timber industry is growing and selling its products to Western and Eastern Europe and even to the USA. For a long time, the March of Brandenburg was noble land. The Prussian aristocracy really left its mark on the area. Tourism lives off it here. Today, the Fürstlich-Drehner Palace between Luckau and Finsterwalde is a hotel. And of course, the palace of all palaces, with the most famous steps in the state. Sans Souci, unbelievably beautiful. Potsdam, a suburb of Berlin. The former royal residence town continues to attract the rich and powerful to this day. More upper class than working class, a sophisticated lifestyle can be catered for here. Only the king is missing. Villas at the Heilige See. Optimal location long since assigned. A lot of money is at the town, also for a very special piece of craftsmanship. Nadine Borchardt is a boat builder, one of very few women in this profession. She specializes in restoring unique historical pieces. This boat is from the 1920s. It stands as a symbol for being seen, as as beautifully and as elegantly as possible. For Nadine Borchert, it's about preserving time a little. That is the game she believes she plays. There is a market for these boats, people who have had enough of our throwaway society. Here, she is restoring what's known as a haarjoller from 1950. For Nadine Borchert, it is like a meditation to work with history on a boat like this, to make it beautiful again. It's not about being able to afford expensive boats or not. It's precisely people like Nadine Borchert with a real passion for their work who make a region exciting. Contrasts, diversity, life. That's what attracts people. Berlin's city centre is bursting at the seams, with building cranes quickly moving into any remaining free spaces. But even as it becomes fuller and fuller, the Berliners are masters at fighting for their free space. A cafe like a beach bar, only without the beach. Freedom on the other side of the eave's height, on the roof of a car park, in the middle of a sea of houses in Neukölln. And it's likely that no other place symbolizes the Berliners' urge for freedom quite like this area, Tempelhof Airport. After the last aeroplane took off from here in 2008, the airfield became a wasteland. Julius Dams, an aerospace engineer who grew up next to it, became an activist and took a stand against any kind of building work. He's into extreme sport, a wind skater, a kite and a skateboard, and off he goes. This open space in the middle of Berlin, kilometers of asphalted landing strips, no cars, all undeveloped, it's the stuff of dreams. The concept for the former airport is to have no concept, and it should stay that way too, Julius Dams thinks. The vote against building work was successful, so it will stay this way, right in the middle of the bustling city. Tempelhof Freedom. Freedom. What does that mean anyway? This word that sounds somehow so conclusive, so final. Freedom probably doesn't mean that everything is just hunky-dory, but it means having the possibility to change things. Seen from the air, you can sense some of this freedom. A small-minded perspective can't recognize it from up here. Any limited vision is lost in the expanse and diversity of the landscape. The view from above shows us the open space. Town and federal state, Berlin and Brandenburg have plenty of that. And as for the Golden Eagle, what does he think of his former home? Is he going to stay? We'll have to wait and see. But it's looking good.